very warm welcome to moneycontrol.com. This morning, we are bringing to you an analysis of an exclusive interview of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to Money Control. The Prime Minister, in his interaction with Network 18 editors, seemed to be in top form as he spoke on a range of issues, from making India's G20 presidency about people to inflation targeting to the need to reform international institutions. And of course, what we heard and what we saw was an articulate elucidation of the grand vision of Prime Minister Modi. To discuss this interview in greater detail, I'm joined by Nalin Mehta, political scientist and journalist and author of several books, and Mr. Sanjay Kumar, professor at CSDS and one of India's foremost political analysts and scientists. Thank you very much, Nalin, for coming down to our studio this morning, and many thanks, Mr. Sanjay Kumar, for joining us from CSDS. One of the striking things about this interview, and this morning the Prime Minister even tweeted the interview, was the constant iteration of the word India. I think the fact that this interview comes a day after that whole debate between India and Bharat, I think today Prime Minister, through this interview, has settled the debate that this is India.
I think what was fascinating to me in the interview was what you said, but also there is a point he makes about Delhi is not Hindustan, or is not just Hindustan. And at a time when social media is abuzz with this Bharat vis-a-vis India debate, he chooses not to get into that. He doesn't use Bharat, doesn't use focus on India, and uses Hindustani words, Delhi and Hindustan. That, I think, Mr. Modi is a master at the language of politics. Few understand it better than him, and I think I found this usage, the point he was making was a very larger point, but the usage and the wordplay there, I think, is fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. Sanjay, I want to go across to you. That's the one thing that was very striking to me this morning, because he tweeted the interview, like I said, and he was very clear when he said that this is India's vision, this is India's time under the sun. How are you reading into this? He settled the debate on this, on the India versus Bharat debate?
No, I think if you look at Shweta very, very carefully, he tried to take the discussion slightly away from India versus Bharat, but he wanted to convey the message that whether we are talking about India or whether we are talking about Bharat, the emphasis is more on the people. It's not about leader. So he kept mentioning that, whether we are talking about India or Bharat, India and Bharat is not Delhi-centric. It is spread across the country. He cherished the diversity, not the political diversity, but he cherished the socio-economic, religious, food, culture, all kinds of diversity. And he emphasized in the interview that there was a conscious effort that various events of G20 should take place in different nooks and corners of this country, because he wanted leaders of other countries to know that India is not only Delhi, but India lives in various other places, and he wanted these leaders to be acquainted with the diverse culture of this country. So I think he took the debate much beyond India and Bharat to the huge diversity of this country.
Right. So, I'll quote him from the interview. There was a certain reluctance to think beyond Delhi, particularly Vigyan Bhavan, for hosting national and international meets. We've also seen how even the visits of foreign leaders would be restricted to mainly the national capital or a couple of other places. So, through this interview, one of the things that I felt was that, he spoke like a global leader. He laid out his vision for India. He also spoke about India's growing clout in the world, and he also speaks about the need for reforming old institutions, old multilateral institutions, to cater to the current needs. And he spoke about he spoke about a whole host of issues where he articulated the global vision and India's place in the world. Nalin, I want to talk to you about the fact that he emphasized on cooperative federalism. Yes, he spoke about how India is not Delhi. He takes it beyond, and he also says that he took delegations outside Delhi to opposition-ruled states, right? And that's one criticism that's always leveled against the government, that they do not believe in cooperative federalism. So he handles this very, very well. He's very articulate about it, and he says that I took the French delegation, I took delegations from multiple countries to opposition-ruled states.
So I think there is a substantive point here, Shweta, that about the democratization of the G20. Never before, I mean, people have talked about, okay, you're the presidency of the G20, it comes by rotation, what's the big deal? But I think there is a lasting legacy of this Indian G20 presidency, which is democratizing how it is held.
Yeah.
Typically, there is a micro monofocal focus on national capitals. I think the PM pointed out that about 220 meetings were held in over 60 cities across all 28 states, 8 union territories, and that in many ways is not just taking it outside the national capital, it's also capacity building. The last major event this country has held was the Commonwealth Games, and look what happened there. So now you have this, but I think there is also a straight line between the Prime Minister's own bilateral diplomacy and what India is leaving as a legacy in the G20. So, for example, he talks about how whether it was Angela Merkel, whether it was the Japanese Prime Minister, whether there were other world leaders who were taken to where meetings were held in outside of Delhi. Also, he specifically says, and that actually intrigued me, that he has not made a single major policy announcement, he says, in his tenure from the Vigyan Bhavan. UPI, for example, was launched in Talkatoora. Now, if you do that, that's capacity building. It's also taking the message out. But I think for the next president of the G20, that will be a hard act to follow.
Absolutely, Sanjay. I want to go across to you on the big message, according to you, that's coming out of this interview, because you're constantly tracking the numbers on ground. You're constantly conducting surveys. He has steered clear of hard politics in this. He has positioned himself as a global leader, and he's spoken about making this India's presidency at the G20 a presidency of the people, and he's delivered on that. And like Nalin pointed out, that Commonwealth Games, when that happened in India, there was so much negative publicity also around it, and that hasn't been the case with India hosting the G20 220 meetings across the year.
Shweta, I have a slight difference of opinion. Not that he has kept himself clearly away from, in this interview, away from politics. Yes, he spoke as a world leader, but I think he was trying to address two constituencies simultaneously. One is the international community, international leader. Look, he was trying to convey the message that why India is important for all the countries, whether developed nation or, developing countries. So he emphasized a lot on the point that the strength of India, whether it is about technology, whether it is about manpower, whether it is about small business, big business. So he kept emphasizing that point all the time in the interview. But also the emphasis on people, the emphasis on the diversity. There's a lot of emphasis on people. It's not that the presidency, yes, he is the Prime Minister of the country, but I think at several places he wanted to give the credit to the people of this country. And why I said that I slightly disagree that he has kept himself away from politics, domestic politics, in the entire interview, because at one place he mentioned most of these development has taken place in the country during last 9 years. What does this 9 year relates to? The 9 years are when Prime Minister Modi has been in the Prime Minister of this country for the last 9 years. So at several places, the emphasis on various kinds of development which India has seen in the country, the emphasis is everything or a large number of things has taken place during the last 9 years. That is why I say emphasis on the people of this country, because we should not forget countries go to elections, the big elections in say 6, 7, 8 months, and before that we have 5 crucial states to go to poll. So I think there is some address. He's also trying to address to the people of this country as voters that, look, this is the development which has taken place, and this has all been done during last 9 years of BJP's government.
And he does that very tactfully, Sanjay and Nalin. He, of course, he is the Prime Minister of the country. and he has his own language of politics, which is very unique to him. But even as he does that, he does speak about India becoming a leading voice in the global south. Very, very important. I think that's something that India has brought to this presidency. It has constantly iterated that it will take up the cause of developing countries. And another thing that was very fascinating for me was his emphasis on women-led development, because that's something that India has been pushing for, and it's been facing a pushback from a lot of other countries. And I feel that as a leader, him talking about women-led development, him talking about as a voice of the global south, he immediately lifts India's standing and priorities, and positions India as a very credible and a very leading voice in this whole space. He's no longer just talking about that, this is the kind of effort that went into organizing this presidency. He speaks about a grander vision.
Yes, I think the point on the tech, for example, on the digital public infrastructure and UPI, India has legitimate bragging rights there. The digital revolution India has seen with the JAM Trinity, then with UPI. It's completely changed social welfare, for example, with direct benefit transfers. It's changed the hinges of the economy in terms of how we transact with the state and with each other on money through our phones. And I think that's become a major tool of Indian diplomacy now, in a way that is unprecedented. India now, it's the West that always had things to give on tech, or the private sector largely. India's digital revolution has been public sector led. UPI is a non-profit. It's run by a consortium of the RBI and other public and private banks. So I think this is a major shift, and this is certainly, that's why it's a centerpiece of India's G20 presidency. On the political point, I agree with Sanjay there. There is an attempt here, of course, to position the Prime Minister as a statesman, but there's a very clear political messaging as well. Here is the Prime Minister who's sort of at ease with the world's leaders and so on, but he makes a very specific political point. He says, a month after he said at the Red Fort in his speech that I will be back next year, very Terminator style, he says specifically, and I'll quote here, he says, 10 years, in 2014, nobody knew Modi, and yet they voted me in with such a huge mandate. 10 years on, they've seen a little bit of Modi everywhere. In the Chandrayaan mission, in my recent visit to the US, now they know me well. I have no doubt that people will choose correctly again. So there's a very clear messaging here.
Absolutely. Sanjay, what's the messaging that's going out to the world leaders? Because we're going to have world leaders, they've already started coming, and this is a very, very crucial weekend for India. Through his multiple comments and multiple responses on India's standing at the G20, India emerging as a voice of the global south, India's friendly relations with nearly every country in the world, and currently it is walking a very tightrope walk where Russia and China are concerned. What's the messaging, according to you, that's going out to the global leaders?
Shweta, I think I have no doubt to say that the message going out to the world leader is all positive. Prime Minister Modi's stature or his popularity has not only gone up in India. If I look at for the last 9 years, surveys after surveys, we have also been doing surveys. I look at the data of other surveys, and all surveys indicate one thing, that Prime Minister Modi remains very, very popular. But there are other international surveys which also indicate, and especially to mention the Pew survey, which is the latest one in the line of various surveys which have come up. The clear indication that Prime Minister Modi is not only popular among the Indian voters, among the Indian people, he's also seen as a popular leader across the world. If we compare his popularity with several other popular leaders of the world of different countries, he stands ahead of them. So the message is all positive. G20 presidency, the way it is being handled, the way it will be handled in the meetings are going to take place on the 9th and 10th. I think last 1 year, everything has gone very, very positive messaging by India, led by Prime Minister Modi himself. And I'm sure the proceedings of the next 2 days, the 9th and 10th September, the meeting, this is all going to add to India's popularity, Prime Minister's popularity, India's credibility across the world. There's no doubt about that.
Right. he also uses his opportunity to talk about reformed multilateralism as a priority for G20. He speaks about how reformed multilateralism needs to focus on going beyond the institutional sphere to tap into the power of individual societies, cultures, and civilizations. And this, he says, can be done by democratizing international relations and by not making government to government relations the only medium of contact, but increasing people to people contact through avenues such as trade and tourism, sports and science, culture and commerce, and mobility of talent and technology, amongst others. So again, very, very crucial points, because this also comes at a time when India is negotiating several bilateral trade agreements. We have a India-UK FTA, which is in the works for a really long time. Mobility and H1 visas, green cards, again, is an issue between India and the United States. So I think here also he's making a very, very substantial statement, and he's also giving out a very strong message that India wants to work on these issues, and India is ready to do whatever it takes to ensure that there's movement on these issues that have been that haven't really been able to make as much progress as probably India would have liked.
I think the interview is interesting both for its substantive points it makes, but also the manner in which it is made. The way the Prime Minister articulates this particular issue, as you pointed out, I think it reflects a kind of a quiet confidence that India is comfortable leading the global South, is positioning itself as the voice of in this debate on climate change. It's both progressive as well as not defensive, and wants a balanced approach on it, but also highly progressive and in tune with where the trend is going.
Yeah. Also, this comes at a time when India has been looking at a lot of measures which have been termed as protectionist. For instance, the import curbs on
Nice save, dude.
But this is nothing compared to what I save on Fellow.
Start saving with Fellow and earn returns up to 12% and rewards up to 1 crore rupees.
But Sanjay ji, I want to go across to you on this. So a lot of these issues, are not really issues that people vote on when it comes to, deciding their vote when they go out to vote during an election. When you look at this interview, I want to understand from you the electoral implications of something like this. What, according to you, have been the issues that you feel and that you think will resonate with people on ground? One is inflation management, of course. And second, I think what's so interesting is the fact that he's made G20, which could have been just another event for most parts of India, into a people's movement. And that's something that he could go back to people with when he gets into election mode.
Shweta, people in the villages won't understand what is G20. But what they would certainly understand is that something big has taken place, and this big means India has emerged taller across the world. So India's image, India's power in the world has gone up. And why it has gone up, who should get the credit? It is Prime Minister Modi who should get the credit for that. So this everything put together, the summary of this would be, the G20 would be, that India is emerging or emerged as a very, very powerful country across the world. We can see eye to eye with most of the powerful country in the world, whether it is China, USA, England, etc., because these are the countries which people also know the names in the rural part of the country. So that's one messaging. So definitely some benefits to the BJP in terms of electoral gains. Very difficult to quantify how much, but certainly it is not going to hamper BJP's electoral prospects. Only it will add to BJP's electoral prospect.
Right.
Second, which I mentioned earlier, look at the three communities which he mentioned in the interview. He said participation of the youth, women, and the poor.
Yes.
And these are the three communities, these are the three groups he's trying to address so carefully. And he also mentions Rakhi. On the occasion of Rakhi, 200 rupees has been slashed on the prices of the gas cylinder. Clear messaging that he wants to send out a message to the women voter, the young voter who are in sizable number, and also the poor of this country. He has been trying to address the poor people through various welfare schemes. The free ration scheme, which is continuing for a very long time. So I think everything goes in the favor of BJP. If I look at in terms of electoral prospect, there's nothing which can even for a even for a smaller aspect can hurt BJP's electoral prospect. So it's all gaga for BJP when it comes to 2024 Lok Sabha elections, and maybe also for the state assembly elections by end of this year.
One of the key legacies of the Modi government will be this instilling of this pride, right, amongst average Indians. India's increased standing global in the world, India's increased stature globally, right? And that's one of the things that I think the Modi government can be credited with. I find one of the things that he said very fascinating. He said that at such a time, it is vital that the world strongly stands against the might is right culture. It must be recognized that shared prosperity through optimum utilization of resources is the only way ahead. What do you think he's trying to say there? Might is right.
He hasn't mentioned China.
No, he hasn't. Yeah.
Pointedly so. But I think it's a enunciation of an older Indian doctrine that India stands for a certain kind of probity, if you like, or a certain kind of ideal, and it will not kowtow before just might. And that's where non-alignment came from. That's where India's refusal to be part of formal alliances comes from in the past. And now look at the Quad. Look at India being this idea of India being a swing state, but now significantly more with more heft than before.
Yes.
And I think something about what Sanjay was saying earlier about in the villages, this projection of Indian global power projection of a statesman like Prime Minister, that's important, because going back to Nehru, that global projection has always been important for domestic projection backwards.
Sure.
But of course, when your country is much more powerful and you are hosting a jamboree like this one, the bragging rights on that become much more.
Right. In fact, Sanjay, people might not know in the villages about G20, but everybody knows about that India has gone to the moon. So I think that's something that that the Modi government will go back with. When was the last time we heard India talk like this? That it is vital the world strongly stands against the might is right culture. I can't remember a very definitive statement like this coming from any prime minister in the past, at least in the recent past.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's an important statement to make, because what the prime minister is also saying is that India will not give in just to aggression.
Right. And this is the time when there's a war going on, and China has shown its heft, or has tried to show its heft, by saying that they will not be coming for the G20 meet. So there is a lot of pushback that's also happening, and it seems that it's going to be difficult for India to come to drive a consensus where a communique is concerned. So
yeah, I mean there is parleys happening between the Chinese delegation and the Indian one on specific words in Sanskrit, of Vasudev Kutumbakam, on
Womenled Development is a contentious issue for
Japan,
China,
and I think that's part of any such global meeting. With China in particular, we have an interest in figuring out how the Chinese play this, because Xi Jinping is not coming. There is a standoff on the line of actual control. But I think how India plays that will be interesting to watch.
Sanjay, I want to come to you on what the Prime Minister said about inflation targeting. Now, inflation has been a big concern globally. And one of the things that have played out in India is about how the government has handled inflation through a series of price control measures. And he does talk about that in this interview. Now, that's of course an issue that resonates on ground with people as well. Do you think people are going to be kind to the Modi government when it comes to their inflation targeting?
Shweta, if I look at the past data, see, if I look at how people used to vote when there was inflation, when there was problem of unemployment, in the say 70s, 80s, and 90s, you could safely predict how a voter is going to vote if he's feeling the pinch of price rise, he's feeling the pinch of unemployment. But since 2019, there is a disconnect between that. Even though people feel the pinch of price rise, people feel that unemployment has gone up. These two people's opinion on these two issues are not shaping their voting decision. Voting decision of people are being shaped by several other issues. And if I want to say one word, this is the whole issue of nationalism, the feeling of nationalism, the euphoria of nationalism. And why I say that? Because surveys after surveys, since 2019, we have figured out that a very large number of people say prices have gone up, they are facing the difficulty. But when we look at their voting intention or the voting pattern, they are not voting against the government. This happened in, say, UP, in Uttarakhand, in Goa, in several states, barring a couple of states where, the opposition party was able to make that as an issue. But over the years, elections after election, this has not become a real electoral issue. I would say opposition parties have failed to make this as an issue, but people, whether it is Lok Sabha elections or the state assembly elections, largely these two issues have not become an electoral issue. Very difficult to predict at this moment whether these two issues would become an issue in 2024 or not. But I think the way it is being played out, this whole issue of national achievement, international achievement, whether it is about Chandrayaan, whether it is about, the Ram Mandir, or whether this G20 would be used in such a way, I think this is going to, subside a lot of impact, or a lot of anxieties which people are facing on the two issues which you mentioned, price rise and unemployment. I don't think that these are going to be the crucial issues on which people are going to vote in 2024 or in 2023 assembly elections.
Fascinating. I also want to talk about climate change, because the Prime Minister does speak at length about climate change. And this is an issue that is impacting people of the developing world a lot more. Currently, if we see just hours away from Delhi, there have been floods and torrential rains in Himachal Pradesh. Thousands of people have lost their lives and livelihoods and so on, and that's not only restricted to this part of the country. It's uneven rainfall, erratic climatic conditions, changing patterns. All of that has become a reality that farmers are working with, and he does speak in great length about climate change. Sanjay, will this be an issue that will play out on ground in the 2024 general elections or the 2023 assembly elections? Climate change?
Well, that depends how it is being conveyed to the people. And if you read the interview, look at how intelligently Prime Minister Modi has tried to convey this to the people of this country. He took the example of floods, earthquake floods, especially floods. So if you talk about climate change, I don't think people in the rural India or a very large part of India, large part of Indian voters are going to connect this word climate change. They might think, oh, this is an urban issue, this is an issue which you keep reading in the newspaper or in the books and the magazines. But the way it is being now conveyed, with examples of floods in Himachal, floods in Uttarakhand, and floods, similar instances or disturbances in various parts of the country. I think now people have started understanding what is this all about. This climate change is not only about big thing; it affects your day-to-day life. So I'm not saying that this is going to be a big electoral issue, but I think the way it is being talked about by Prime Minister Modi in the interview, it is going to draw attention of the people of this country, voters of this country, and they are going to take it slightly more seriously now compared to how they have looked at this issue in the past.
Absolutely. Taking that forward, Nalin, absolutely. When the leader of a nation talks about the importance of climate change and preserving the environment, something that has always been considered a non-relevant topic for India. India needs to develop, India needs to do its bit in industrialization. It's the developed world that's caused all the pollution and let them take care of it. That's been the narrative so far. But the Prime Minister now is changing the narrative, and he talks about it. He says that the world, whether it is developed or developing countries, needs to accept that climate change is not only a reality but a shared reality. The impact of climate change is not regional or local, but it is global. Yes, the global south will be affected disproportionately. So until now, India's argument, and overarchingly the opinion has been that why should India step up when it comes to controlling emissions and so on? But the Prime Minister has really changed that game. He's spoken about net zero emissions. He's set targets for India, and India has accomplished those targets. So when we talk about when a Prime Minister takes the lead in this, what's the message that goes out to the larger public, to the stakeholders, and also to the youth, because the youth is very, very connected and very concerned about such issues?
I think it's also the language in the way he's put it out. Sanjay was saying he's used very everyday language to connect going beyond the jargon, beyond what goes in thick reports that nobody reads outside of the immediate stakeholders or the powers that be. I think and India has legitimate rights to say that, because India has also taken a lead, for example, in solar energy in a way that is unprecedented. So India is not just making a substantive point about its shift in climate, in the way it looks at climate change. It's taking significant measures, and that's directly been funded by the Prime Minister. There is the whole shift on solar has been led by him directly. He's personally put his political capital behind it. So while you are making you're not just being defensive about we can't do anything about it. You are saying we're making these changes, but also saying with a quiet confidence that look, everybody shares a shared responsibility.
Because he says the second factor in which change is needed is in terms of strategy. A disproportionate focus on restrictions, criticism and blame cannot help us tackle any challenges, especially when we seek to do it together. And then he talks about the need for sensitivity. I want to go across to one of India's most spectacular success stories, UPI. And that's something, again, that the Prime Minister has spoken about very extensively. And I think that's where India has taken the lead, and it has become one of our big showcase projects for the world leaders to come in. World leaders have come in and tweeted pictures about how you can go to a local vegetable vendor and just pay through your phone. And that's something that I do regularly. And when you go abroad, you feel that, oh my God, this is where India is ahead. And I think that's something that he showcased beautifully in the interview as well.
Absolutely. I mean, when we think about digital disruption, we think about Silicon Valley. We think about the West more broadly. UPI is a digital disruption that has gone viral on a scale that has never been seen before globally. It's changed the way Indians transact with each other. You can go across the most backward regions in this country and not have to take out cash. So in that sense, I mean, just this month, last month, we've crossed 10 billion transactions on UPI. There is an ambition to even cross the global number on, I mean, I think, if I'm not wrong, Shweta, and you would know this better than I would, it took UPI 6 months to cross the number of transactions that it took Visa or MasterCard to do in 25 years, right?
Yes.
So, and the thing is, with the great thing about UPI is that it's interoperable. It's not just from one mobile wallet to another. It's interoperable. It's linked to the banks, and I think therefore India now genuinely has a digital public infrastructure to offer to other countries, specifically in the global south. And if you go to the US, for example, if you're on the welfare dole in the US, you'll still get your payment on a check. In India, you can get it through direct benefit transfers, and there is a big thing India now has to offer to the world now on this.
I want to talk to Sanjay about this. Sanjay, what's the sense that you have from people on the ground on this, on India's digital story? Whether it's UPI, whether it's Jam Trinity, it's been transformational when we read about it, when we look at the numbers. But when it comes to how it has changed lives of people on ground, and will this become an election issue as well?
Shweta, I don't think that people try to make a connection that the UPI has made their life so easy, and this is because of the government of India, because of Prime Minister Modi. But one thing, this
is the old gym life. This is the Smart Connect life. TVS Jupiter ZX Smart Connect with call and SMS alert.
UPI, which is going to make an impact on the electoral prospects of BJP, because I don't think people directly make a connection that this is, yes, they understand that this is now the payment of money has become so easy, but they are not in a position, they are not putting so much of effort to figure out how this
No, but
facility
the
has
fact
come
that they're
to.
getting the full amount, whatever was allocated,
Yes.
has reached their account. They don't
I
have
want
to
to make
run
a
around
point
for
here,
it.
Shweta, that
Absolutely, that is what is going to help the BJP, and Prime Minister Modi has also mentioned that in this interview, that look, now the money is being transferred to the beneficiary's account without any cuts and without any difficulty, timely, without any cuts. So that's making a huge impact, and that is why if you look at BJP's expansion in the support base during last 10 years, one should not forget that 2009 BJP had 18.6% vote. In 2019 election, they had 19.7%, 37.8% vote.
Right.
So the BJP had added almost 19%. Their vote share got doubled in last 9 years. And who are the ones who have moved towards BJP in a big way? I'm not saying that this is the only section. BJP has attracted voters from all sections of voters,
Yeah.
but the poor have moved towards BJP in a big way. The rural poor voter have started voting for the BJP in a big way during last 5-7 years, and
Right.
this is going to be a strength of BJP in the years to come, in decades to come, I would say.
Fascinating. Yes, Nalin.
So the one reason why the BJP has become the default party of the poor in North India in particular has been because of direct benefit transfers. This is something that was not invented by the BJP. It was Aadhaar, was Nandan Nilekani in UPA
Right.
and so on. But look at what happens after Modi comes to power in 2014. There was a question mark over Aadhaar.
Yes.
If you remember, in March, between March to July 2014, there's a meeting that happens between Modi and Nilekani, where Modi would also oppose Aadhaar before that.
Yeah.
He changes his mind, he puts his entire political capital behind it and scales up. Look at the numbers. There's been 111x change in the amount of money that's been transferred, 7,500 crores in 2013-14 in direct benefit transfers. That includes the Manmohan Singh period, and that goes up to 8.5 lakh crores. By 22-23, and that includes both direct benefit transfers in cash and in
Right.
kind. That's a huge paradigm shift, and I think a lot of people think of the BJP as a one-trick pony, as Hindutva nationalism,
Right,
cultural
right.
nationalism, but the development through direct benefit transfers is a significant part of its outreach and its expansion.
Right, absolutely. Okay, very quickly, we have to close this discussion, but he also takes a dig at the freebies that are being offered right now, from different state chief ministers. A whole host of freebies are being doled out every day, and as we go into this assembly election mode, we can expect more of such announcements. And he does talk about that how they wreck an economy, how they can wreck countries.
I think that's an important point to make, but the nub in that debate, of course, is that the definition of the freebie.
Right.
Simply because, so to give the Prime Minister credit where it's due, I think in the expansion of direct benefit transfer at the central level, there is the fiscal deficit is not ballooned out of control. I think that there's been enough care taken on that. But if you, it's like one man's terrorist, another man's freedom fighter, right? So when does a welfare measure cross the dividing line into becoming a freebie,
Right.
and that's where, and as you go into election mode,
Right.
you're going to see a lot more of this debate.
Right.
You're already seeing this in Karnataka now, with the
Right,
5
right.
promises of the Congress.
Right. So, Sanjay, I want to talk to you about this. Clearly, as in you see Rajasthan, you see Karnataka, you see a lot of the states that are going for elections or have gone in for elections have announced a slew of freebies, and the Prime Minister has spoken very categorically against this whole concept of freebies. The broad definition that we are working with is freebie is something that's over and above something that leads to social development, educational development, and so on. Freebie is something that's extra. So what's your sense, because this government has steadfastly maintained that they are not going to go down the path of freebies, and a very strong message coming in from the Prime Minister before we get into election mode, 2024 election mode. It's going to be a huge comfort to the investors and to those who track macro numbers, but when it comes to the political realities on ground, do you think the government will be able to steer clear of, the central government would be able to steer clear of offering freebies, and do these freebies resonate with people on ground?
Oh, Shweta, I definitely resonate with the people on the ground. Promises are not working anymore for electoral gain, but when you start getting things in your pocket, if you start getting money in your bank account, so that's working a lot, not only for the central government. You named a few states, you can keep taking the names of, 10, 20 more states. And you look at all the states government are indulging into what if you call freebies, if you call welfare schemes. And why they are doing that? Because we see a clear relationship. The beneficiaries of these schemes are voting in favor of the ruling party of the state in a big way. So they see an electoral gain. I think whatever promises or whatever announcement may be made by Prime Minister Modi himself or by the BJP government at the center, I don't think they will be able to stay absolutely clear away from this whole business of freebie. While they may not call it freebies, but say subsidy in the name of the recent announcement of 200 rupees subsidy on the gas cylinder.
Right.
So it would come in a different packaging. The packaging would be different. And packaging would be more attractive compared to what is being done by maybe other regional parties. You talk about Aam Aadmi Party, they keep saying, bijli free, pani free, and they say it very openly. So this is not the way in which central government would come out with doling out freebies, but it would be in a way of helping the poor, helping those who are in need. So as I said, packaging is going to be different,
Sure.
but it is going to be very difficult for the central government to keep themselves away at a time when country goes for polls. Crucial election next year, and also 5 states goes to poll in 2023.
Right. Very interesting. Of course, we'll know more as we get closer to assembly elections and general elections. Our editors did ask him about the secret sauce behind his energy levels and behind his commitment, because I think that's something that Prime Minister Modi has been consistent about. 9 years, he's not taken a day off. He works non-stop. Anybody who's worked with him will tell you that you can discuss anything under the sun with him and he'll have a very informed opinion, and he will hear with completely with an open mind. He'll hear you with completely with an open mind, and he will come back with very sharp points. In which I think he very subtly just brings in this message that he has nothing to gain personally, and he's driven not only by ambition but by mission. And I think again a very, very important point coming in at a time when there is a lot of rhetoric, a lot of talk about politicians working working for personal gains and so on.
So I think that this is a very central pillar of brand Modi.
Right.
Apart from everything else, a lot of the appeal of brand Modi is about a political leader who doesn't have a family that is benefiting from the pelts and the spoils of power, and a work ethic. Whether you agree with him ideologically or not, I don't think anybody can question his work ethic in terms of, because he's a 24/7 politician, and to beat a 24/7 politician, you have to be a 24/7 politician.
Right.
And I think he's brought that work ethic, and it's not just these 9 years; it's also the almost 15 odd years as Chief Minister of Gujarat from 2001 onwards. So he's a politician who's not lost a single election in 20 plus years. And his work ethic, I think, is something which brings an extra edge to and this eye for detail in the political machinery and as they go forward.
Absolutely. Sanjay, how much of his personal branding as someone who is completely driven by the country and has no family whatsoever, has nothing to gain personally, it's a point that he makes even in the interview, how much of that has helped him and works for him when he goes out to ask for votes?
Absolutely. This is a big asset. And this is not an asset many politicians in India would have, that you're working for the country, you're not selfish, you're not earning or doing anything to benefit your family. So this is a huge asset which Prime Minister Narendra Modi has. And there are several things which adds to his popularity. He is being very, very popular among the Indians. This is one of the several factors and an important factor. that this is a man who works 24 hours a day. This is a man who works 365 days in a year, and all his time is devoted for the welfare of the country, nothing for himself and no work for his own family. A great asset. And I would endorse whatever Nalinji has said about, about his work ethics, whether you agree with his ideology or not. But it's very difficult to, disagree with his work style, his work ethics, and the way he puts in so much of effort in work.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you so much for that, Nalin and Sanjay. Clearly, the Prime Minister, through this exclusive interview to Money Control, positions himself as a global leader. He reaches out to investors, he reaches out to world leaders, he reaffirms India's growing standing in the world. He talks about India's strengths, he talks about UPI, he talks about India's ethos. He also, very importantly, talks about what makes him him. Again, something that Sanjay said, that there is no other leader in the country that can actually just say that they are in this profession of politics for no personal gain. It's only Prime Minister Modi, and he does talk about that as well. And in the end, he talks about his focus on discipline and daily habits to maintain a healthy body and mind. So he reaches out to several constituencies through this interview. It's live on our website moneycontrol.com, and of course we will be bringing you lots more analysis through the day and through the weekend. Thanks so much for watching.
The biggest interview of the year. Prime Minister Modi speaks to Money Control. Ahead of the G20 summit, India's place in a multipolar world. The war against inflation. India's technology and human capital. A Money Control mega exclusive.